Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to go over another variable that we look at before we decide to invest in a piece of crypto, and that is asset supply. So what do I mean by asset supply? I mean how many coins or tokens are out there and how many are going to be made. And this is very important to know when you're considering the supply and demand for this piece of crypto. And before we go into this, I want to go over two terms. We're going to go over inflationary versus deflationary. So if you live in the US or any other country that has a fiat currency, a lot of times you'll understand what inflation is, right? So there's inflation on the US dollar. They will make more of them. Now it's important for a lot of reasons. And if you want a transactable currency that is efficient and works really well, you need a little bit of built-in inflation. It helps with price volatility, and for certain countries it can help with interest rates and things like that. But if we're looking at this from an investment point of view, which we are a lot of times when we're buying cryptocurrencies, we want our coins or tokens to be deflationary, which means that there is a finite amount, right? There is a set amount that there will be, and that amount will never go up. This is why they have a great supply and demand. So you find a crypto that you're interested in and you want to find this out. Where should you go? The first place, of course, is coinmarketcap.com. Now once you go there and you pull up the page for the coin or token you want to look at, there's three things you need to look for. First up, you want to see the circulating supply, the total supply, and the max supply. So the circulating supply is how many are actually changing hands. What is actually in circulation at the moment? The next thing you want to look at is there a total supply? And this might not be there. Total supply is how many are actually out and have been released to the people. And then the final thing you're going to look for is max supply. And this may not be there either. And this is the absolute set amount. There will never be any more than this. Right? So some examples. So if you pull up Ether, all right, Ether is going to give you a circulating supply, but it's not going to give you a total supply or a max supply. That is because there is not a finite amount. There is an infinite amount of Ether. They can always create more. So we are still invested in Ether, and we think it's a great protocol, but that is something to consider when you're investing, is that it is inflationary. Another example of a coin that you would look at is something like Bitcoin. When you pull up Bitcoin, it's going to give you that circulating supply, which is over 16 million, and it's going to give you the total supply, or excuse me, the max supply. And that max supply is very important. There will never be more than 21 million. There is a finite amount. Think of this as like gold, right? There will never be more than a certain amount of gold. Now, more can be mined, right? Like that's the circulating supply is how much gold is out there right now. Now, we could always find more gold and that sort of thing, but eventually we're going to hit a certain point. Same thing with Bitcoin. There's 16 something million out there being used and stuff like that. But eventually, we're going to hit a point where there will never, ever be more than 21 million. So it is a deflationary currency where the supply and demand here is very good. Now, another example of something you might find on CoinMarketCap is a coin that has a circulating supply and it has a total supply. Now, an example of this is going to be something like Ripple. Now, the total supply is how many have been released, but there could be more than that. And actually, in Ripple's case, there is a max supply, and lucky enough on CoinMarketCap, they list it. But on some coins, they don't, right? So if you find a circulating supply with just a total supply, that's a little bit of a gray area. We need to dig in deeper here because there's this amount is in circulation, and this is how many have been released. But if it says total, not max, a lot of times that means that there can be more released at a later point. Now, if that's the case, you need to dive deeper. Now, on every piece of crypto that we buy, we absolutely dissect that white paper. And a lot of times in the white paper, this is where you find that information. And if you find a coin that doesn't list this in the white paper, there's a really big red flag. But let's say you don't want to dive all the way through the white paper and dig for this. Another website that you can go to is one called onchainfx.com. Now, once you go there, there's a little search bar. You can search for the currency that you want, and you pull up their page. We absolutely love this website. You'll go down and there's a thing that'll say like supply information, and it'll give you a little bit of an overview of what the supply is like. Now, if it has a max supply, it'll usually tell you, hey, here's what the ICO looked like, here's how many have been released, and here's how many are out there. But if it's something like Ether, where there's an infinite amount, it'll also give you a summary of the inflation rate. That's something very important to know. Even if a coin is inflationary, it might still be a good investment if the inflation rate is pretty low. Or it'll tell you, here's the total supply, but eventually here's going to be the max supply. So there's a lot of really good information that you can find here. So now you kind of have an overview or an idea of where your coin sits. Is it inflationary? Is it deflationary? And then how many are out there? Now, another thing you need to consider is that even though your coin is deflationary, it might have a max amount, you need to kind of look at the ratio between what is the circulating supply and what is the max supply, right? Because if there is a ton to be mined, or if there is a ton to be released, that could be another red flag where all of a sudden someone dumps a ton into the market, and that could really affect the price. Now, we see this with something like Litecoin, where a lot of the Litecoin was held by one person, right? It was held by one individual, and he kind of flooded the market when he sold a lot of it. That was actually the Litecoin founder. So there's something else you need to consider is a lot of the coins that have been released, are they sitting in one spot? And how much control does that one spot or person, entity, group, whatever it is, have control of the market? If they decide to sell out, is that really going to drastically affect the price? So we look at all of these things, and it's another variable that we plug into our matrix when we consider investing in a piece of crypto. Now, it's not the most important thing, but it's definitely something that you need to consider before you put your money into something.